Can you let me share? Well, welcome, and I'm just going to ask to have my screen shared, please, Simon. I'm Liz
done.
Millman from Learning Links International, and it's great to have a lovely group of people here with us today as our panel who are going to contribute and share with us some of the stories of the departure of Windrush. So here we are with the slide that starts us off today. So it's good to see you all. And today is Friday, the 27th of May, an important date, but a date that's often overlooked. So we're getting behind the headlines of 74 years ago today. And we've got Vivian Crawford, who's the Executive Director of the Institute of Jamaica, with us today. So that's really great, and we've got other guests so that we'll be able to start an exploration. So as the Empire Windrush travels over the next few weeks until it arrives at Tilbury for its 74th anniversary arrival, we're going to be hearing about different stories, some of the stories behind the headlines, as we decided to call our thing today. So I'm here in Australia, and here it's National Reconciliation Week. So I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm currently living, the Wurundjeri of the Kulin Nation, their elders past, present and future. And remember, this land belongs to the sovereign people of the First Nations. It was never ceded. It always was, and it always will be. So this National Reconciliation Week's got some particularly interesting elements to it. The website, nrw.reconciliation.org.au, has got lots of information about things that are going on. And the strapline for this year is "Be brave, make change." So, as I say, today is the start day and it goes on for a week, so there'll be lots on the television. But I just wanted to share this with you as well from Australia, where Australia elected a new Australian Labor Party government. And in his first presentation, Anthony Albanese, the new Prime Minister, said that he intended to look at the Uluru Statement from the Heart, which is now 5 years since it was produced, and recognise that there needs to be a voice in the Parliament. And at the end of his presentation, he repeated the same thing. So this is really significant because with today marking the 5th anniversary of the Uluru Statement as well, this is really good news for us here. So I just wanted to say that after all these weeks, and it does seem a long time now, we're still remembering the people of Ukraine and what they're going through. I've added a little cartoon this week, which I thought was rather lovely, because this dear elderly lady from Ukraine is unraveling the wool that's knitted together the tanks of the Russian invaders. So an interesting little cartoon that. Also, I couldn't not say, but we have to say that the families in Texas who are grieving the loss of 19 children and 2 teachers are in our thoughts. But a very pleasant anniversary, a good anniversary, was Africa Day on Wednesday. So remembering that Haile Selassie was an important leader in the process of bringing the Organization of African Unity together. And these remarks were from the President of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. And he says, as we commemorate the day, we reflect on the accomplishments of people across the African continent and on the challenges they still endure. So the theme this year is focused on the importance of addressing malnutrition and food insecurity. So these are really stark development challenges, he said. So onto our main theme this time. And I'm just going to share one more slide, and then I've got some others that I can pick up within a little while. And this slide is from the Gleaner in 1948, which said that 900 are leaving by Windrush this morning, and the pier was thronged. So the Windrush saga begins, and the article was republished in 2021. Now, in my conversations with Vivian Crawford, I was asking if the Institute of Jamaica, which I know is in downtown Kingston, and I visited, and I think you can see the sea from when you're standing outside on the pavement. So the ship was docked in Kingston Harbour, and it was at the Royal Mail Wharf. So I was fascinated to know if it was nearby or not. So Vivian, it's lovely to see you. Really, really good. And what have you been able to think through in terms of the remembrance of the anniversary of Windrush departing in 1948?
Thank you so much, Liz. Thank you so much, Liz. And I use every opportunity that I can, that I'm exposed to, that I can share, to thank you most sincerely for your tireless efforts. It's just really incredible that you would find all this time and energy to be with us, connecting the dots from all over the world. You deserve more than mangoes. You are with us in our hearts. I hasten to say, in thanking you for the Windrush anniversary, that on Thursday we commemorated in Jamaica. No, on Wednesday we commemorated Africa Day, and we exposed our children to the story, because under colonial education, nothing complimentary was said about Africa. So we have to be teaching anew so that they can be exposed to it. And the unfortunate shock of it was that from the Institute of Jamaica, where I work, we were able to take the shackles for the children to see. I'm afraid it didn't come over very well, because the children, they cried, although they're children, you know, they cried to know what happened. And it was emphasized really by a quotation I always use, that our own Professor Colin Chana said, our ancestors did not come through immigration. They came through customs, but because they were regarded as goods. And as I said earlier, thanks be to God, out of that, from Africa to Jamaica, and from Jamaica to England in 1948, I mentioned earlier, among the many, many, many outstanding Jamaicans, Lord Bill Morris, who later became Chancellor of our University of Technology, Jamaica, and Sir Geoffrey Palmer for his contribution. And the Windrush is telling us, for me, and it's a personal statement, is something I was taught at Teachers College. Regard every child as a king or a queen, because you do not know which one is going to wear the crown. And that's a lesson for all of us in our association with others. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. That was really important to start us on our way. And I know in a moment or two you're going to tell us about some of the stories about how disruptive this was, that the children were leaving. But I'll just have a look at some more of the slides I've prepared, and then we'll just move on from there. So thank you though, Vivian, that was lovely. So one of the largest batches of passengers to leave Jamaica in peacetime, reported the Gleaner 74 years ago, will sail from the island this morning. when the troop ship Empire Windrush leaves port on the long voyage home to England, taking a huge total of 900 passengers from Kingston. So this was a cross-section of Jamaica's citizens, musicians, boxers, craftsmen, clerks, and the rest going to England in search of work, as well as many professional persons going on holiday, making up a really big passenger list. And added to that was Jamaican RAF and other military personnel returning from leave and duty. So during its 3 days in port, the Windrush became easily the most popular ship that's docked in Kingston Harbour for a long time. And all day yesterday at the Royal Mail Wharf, where the vessel lay alongside, was a scene of activity and animation as dialing preparations proceeded. Quite sure what that is. Right, as boarding preparations proceeded. So it must have been a real image. So the advertisement from the Gleaner, in the Gleaner, went out in April, I think. And there was also a news article, that's the one I've just read through, about 900 leaving by Windrush this morning. So, you know, this was a really big story. But I've tried and tried to find a photograph of Windrush, Empire Windrush at Kingston. And I thought that I'd been successful. But I have to tell you, I wasn't. Because this isn't the Windrush. The Windrush was a white ship. And I have found another illustration of this particular ship. So Vivian, that's one of the things that I'd really, it would be great to find. So this is a picture of the Windrush, one of the few coloured pictures that I found. Very elegant looking vessel. So the small newspaper advert, which was 15th of April, and remember this was the 27th of May, so it was only a month for people to get the idea that they might have an opportunity. And there's so much more information written about this, but just to say that the troop ship Empire Windrush sailing about the 23rd of May, she went on the 27th, and the fares for the cabin class were £48, and for the troop deck were £28. Now that's a lot of money in those days. And it was the Royal Mail Lines Limited at 8 Port Street, or possibly 6, where you'd buy your tickets. So here I found that Peter Plowman, who's Australian and who's interested in the voyages between Australia and the UK, includes in his article this interesting diagram map showing exactly what happened. So the ship had started in Australia, which is why he had the interest. And then a little bit later, we're going to hear from Bill Hearn, who's going to talk about his research all about the Windrush and the passengers. So after Trinidad, then Kingston, then Tampico, Mexico, then on to Bermuda. And there's all sorts of stories about these different places as the ship went, and then its journey over, and stories about what went on. So I think I'm going to finish with that bit of the oops-a-daisy, that bit of illustration, and just ask you a little bit more about what we were talking about earlier, when Vivian, when you were saying that that 2 children suddenly joined your school in Kingston at this time. So tell us what happened about that.
Yes, they were born in Kingston, and the mother was from Moortown. Moortown, you know, is a Maroon community, and the British, they were forced to sign a treaty in 1739 with a woman, Nanny. Let me hasten to say, in 2017, Oxford University Press sent an apology, which was read in the Parliament, that they had not given enough attention to that treaty in their historical overview. But the children, they came, my good friends, and the parents left for England. And I often, looking back, I think of the tension. You're separated from your parents. That was so cruel. But they were gone to seek a better life. And my friends eventually joined the parents in London. And then they wrote to tell me that the children, some of them had never seen a black boy, and they kept touching him and holding him. Some even said that he needed to go and have a wash. And it was very sad for me, because in my own school, we had learned about child life in other lands, and we knew what was going on in each country. But sadly, our story was not to be told. But thank God, our story is like oil. It cannot be kept underwater. It must float even at this stage.
That's fantastic. And I've just got a message from Shabana. There are plenty of photographs of the Empire Windrush arriving in Tilbury, but what I can't find is any photographs of the Empire Windrush in Kingston. That would be so fascinating. So, Vivian, just going back to what you're saying, I've given this a lot of thought, and I wondered about how children who arrived from Jamaica might be received, or even the first, particularly the first people who came over in 1947 and 1948, because there were a couple of ships before Windrush, weren't there? But I saw a program on the television the other night about the East End Blitz in World War II, and the devastation in the East End of London, which is where Tilbury was absolutely incredible. But it wasn't shared at the time, not that I would have remembered, I wasn't born until 55, but arriving in a country where really the education system and education provision must have been really, really difficult during those war years. So I can only assume that, you know, children weren't taught at that time about children in other countries. But I do remember that series of books that you mentioned, Children's Lives in Other Lands, and I loved reading that series and learning about somebody in the Congo and some Eskimo, and perhaps not all the most correct phrases for today, but it was a fascinating series about these children and just what their lives were like. So yes, it's putting it back into context, isn't it? So it's good to have other colleagues joining us as well. So that disruption, Vivian, obviously you don't remember that time, but do you remember people talking? Have people talked to you about that?
Well, they miss their parents, but it made up at Christmas, because at Christmas, the post office was packed with goodies from England. I too benefited, but what I could not understand, every pants, every trousers was gray. That's the only color that came. It was gray. Oh my God. We couldn't get over that. And it's but we look forward to that, and we were grateful. And then I noticed that somebody sent a winter coat, which someone attempted to wear to church, and she was sweating like a bull. You get a gift, and the gift is to be worn at Christmas. But this lady was in a winter coat. Oh my God. So the stories where we can laugh now, but because laughter is the only tranquilizer without side effects. But
that's a lovely way of saying it. Yes, it
yes,
is. It's
yes,
so hard. I
yes,
understand shoes arrived and they were the wrong sizes and all sorts. I'm just going to share one of the other things that I found to share today. There was a really interesting article in the Independent, written just in January by Nadine White, and she talks about the barrel children, the Windrush families, and the emotional burden of migration. So that's a really interesting long read in the Independent. So yes, you're quite right to remember that and those stories. And there's the
Sorry, Liz.
Empire Windrush.
I'm sorry, Liz. Barrel children, Barrel was never associated with England. Barrel is America,
Oh,
United States of America. England was parcels, 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 England, Barrel, America.
that's really interesting, isn't it? Really
Yeah.
interesting.
The parcels, the parcels.
Oh, that's lovely. I'm just going to carry on with the PowerPoint and just see where I'm up to here. Okay. Oops, the daisy, get rid of the chat. And just to say, I mean, this will be relevant when you're talking, Bill, but I'm going to ask if we can do a few more contributions before we hear your story, although it would have fitted in here. And I actually printed off the sea arrival card of Lawrence Daniel. Now, Lawrence is the dad of Levi and Neil Lawrence. And he's passed now, sadly, but he's got a recording of his perspectives on Windrush. It was recorded by the BBC, so we won't be hearing about that this time, but we will on another occasion. All right, just a couple of other things here about the many books there are about Windrush now. So we've got here just 3 that I picked out. Homecoming Voices of the Windrush Generation, it's by Colin Grant. And Natives, this brilliant book by Akala, telling his story. It's a really very readable, very moving book. Again, Voices of the Windrush Generation. And then here we've got just an indication of just how many more books there are. There's certainly not a lack of information now about the Windrush. The last one here, though, Story of the Windrush. This is by Candace Chimbiri. And I'd arranged for Candice to come and speak today, but she didn't realise, and I perhaps hadn't made it quite so clear, that we changed the time till 2 o'clock in the afternoon rather than 12. So she sent me an email to say that she'd been waiting to join at 12, and I felt really awful. So I'm hoping that Candice will come again because this is a non-fiction children's book, as well as there are also fiction stories. So the next one we're going to hear about then, June Elizabeth. June Elizabeth suggested that perhaps she might read some passages over the weeks from Benjamin Zephaniah's historical fiction, which is called Windrush Child. It's not an autobiography, it's not his story, it is a fiction. So I just picked this bit out to put in because there's, at the beginning of the book, because you can see it on Amazon, there's a warning. This story contains strong language that some readers might find offensive. In reality, when you're on the receiving end of some of these words, you're very offended. But I think I'd be cheating readers if I were to gloss over some of the language that was used by racists. As a young boy in school, I remember people saying, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names can never hurt me." I didn't believe them. Names hurt me. I was called names because of the colour of my skin and because I was dyslexic, even because of the way I spoke, and those words really hurt. Fortunately, I use words, says Benjamin Zephaniah, to fight back, and I became a writer. So I wonder then, June Elizabeth, if you'd like to share a little bit from Benjamin Zephaniah's book, Windrush Child?
Yes, so good afternoon, everyone. I'll just read the back page first. And Grandma said that lions always roar. Always, I replied, and we should be like lions. We should never be afraid to speak. Leonard is shocked when he arrives with his mother in the port of Southampton. His father is a stranger to him. It's cold, and even the Jamaican food doesn't taste the same as it did back home in Maroon Town. But his parents had brought him here to try to make a better life. So Leonard does his best not to complain, to make new friends, to do well at school, even when people hurt him with their words and with their fists. How can a boy so far from home learn to enjoy his new life when so many things count against him? So at the beginning of the book, he explains a little bit about chapter 1. I love history. I am history. We made history. We were the people of Maroon Town, Jamaica. This is where I was born on the 15th of October, 1947. But long before I was born, I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of years ago, the Taino and Arawaks lived in Jamaica. They were farmers who used to create fertilizer to help grow cassava, peanuts, corn and beans. They used to trade pottery, wood carving and crops with other Amazonian tribes. And although it wasn't perfect, they lived in peace for hundreds of years. I didn't learn anything of this at school in Jamaica. In school, I just got taught English history. It was my grandma, my mum, and the elders in Maroon Town who told me about the real history of Jamaica. It wasn't written down, but passed on by word of mouth from one generation to the next. They even taught me songs and poems about our country, but we weren't allowed to sing those songs in school. Instead, we had to sing God Save the Queen and Rule Britannia. So I will just move on to his grandma telling him about his granddad who passed away when his dad was born. And he also mentions in Maroon Town, I could see that most of the people were of African descents, but there were also people from China, India and Syria. I used to wonder where they came from until Brother Brooke explained to me. Now, Brother Brooke is a Rasta man that he refers to, who's a friend of the family. And I used to wonder where they came from until Brother Brooke explained to me that when slavery was over, the British brought lots of Chinese and the Indians to Jamaica to work. They were paid very little. Some were not paid at all, and most people thought it was much better than slavery. The Lebanese and the Syrians came as refugees, and there were other Europeans who came simply because they wanted to live in a warm, beautiful country. Although I never knew my granddad, I've gone to chapter 2, I found out a lot about him from Grandma. Your granddad was born in 1906. And we were born down the road from each other, which was amazing. Grandma smiled. You see how nature's smart? Nature created a bird that can move so fast without moving. That is wonderful, because a bird came and flapped his wings nearby where she was talking. Anyway, moving on, what I found interesting was Grandma said that a year before your dad was born. See how him look nice in him suit? She had a picture of him. He was a true maroon. When your dad was 13, your granddad used to take him into the mountains and teach him how to live off the land. Him teach him how to survive by finding food in the wild and how to find his way through the bush. She reached over to me, pointing to the photo. So I took them and handed them to her. The rain was heavily falling outside and she looked at the photo for a long minute. No to the British, no to the Spanish, yes to freedom, he used to say. But then he had to make a big decision. World War II was on and the British needed help. They were asking for men and women from Jamaica to help them fight the war. Granddad wasn't sure what to do. This was part of my family history that I could not understand. Why him leave Jamaica, Grandma? At the time, many Jamaicans thought that no one from the Caribbean should help Britain. They said World War II was a white man's war. So Jamaica still run by the British. So other people believe that if Jamaica fought with the British, when the war was over, it would help Jamaicans get independence. Your granddad said Adolf Hitler was the enemy who hated all of us. So I'd never seen my grandma cry. She had said that when the fighting was done, he had planned to come back to Jamaica and campaign for independence from the British. In 1939, he passed his medical test. He went to England for military training, and then he was sent to fight the bad people who invaded France. But in 1940, he was killed in what them called the Battle of Arras. She paused for a while and stared at the photo in her hand. I could see tears running down her cheeks. She looked directly at me and with her red, watery eyes and said, "You know, Leonard, all I got from the British government was a letter saying that he died in action and was buried where he fell. He wasn't even listed as dead back in Britain."
Oh, this is just so touching, so touching. And
So,
I think it obviously shows that the book really sets it into the context of the time, doesn't it?
yes.
Yeah.
So,
Are you going to carry on then next week and tell us a little bit, read us a little bit more?
yes, so next week, if I just finish this little bit,
Oh, I'm sorry.
because
Yes.
then that introduces us into the Windrush.
Oh, right.
Okay. I'm not reading all of it. I'm just taking out the bits. Right. The British government had posters all over Jamaica telling people that they would be welcome to come to Britain to help rebuild the country because the war had left it in ruins. So now we're going to World War II. Jamaicans were told on radio and in town halls that Britain was the land of opportunity where the streets would soon be paved with gold. They were told that they would be greeted with a great British hand of friendship because they were British citizens and they were welcomed in the mum country. My dad couldn't resist. He felt he had to do something for Britain and for himself. So 7 months after I was born, he boarded a ship and sailed to England. He promised Mum that after a few years of work, he would return and everything would be all right. So my dad left when I was just a baby. As soon as he landed, he sent back a letter to Mum and Grandma and a postcard to me. The postcard had a picture of the ship that took him to England. It was called the Empire Windrush. On the back of the card, he wrote, "I am a Windrush man, so you, my child, are a Windrush child."
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much. That's really brilliant. Now, June Elizabeth, you're going to choose another few clips from that. Thank you very much indeed. And we'll be able to hear those over the next few weeks as we travel.
Yes, that's fine. Okay.
Hey, lovely. Well, we're going to now ask Bill to tell us about his project. So I'm just putting this slide back up again because this is about the passenger list. So I don't know if Leonard's family were listed, but as it's a fiction, I suspect not. But anyway, I'm going to say over to you, Bill. I don't know if you want to share anything or just talk with us.
I
Tell
haven't.
us about the project.
No, I think, Liz, you wanted me to talk about the background to the piece of work that I'm doing.
Lovely, thank you.
What I'm doing is trying to tell the stories of each of the 1,027 passengers on board the Windrush, plus the 15 apprehended stowaways, although we suspect there are many more stowaways that we'll never ever be able to trace. Why am I doing this? Because we know virtually nothing about the individual passengers. And why would we? Because in 1948, they had no idea that they were actually a part of history. They couldn't have dreamt that one day there'd be a Windrush day, a Windrush generation, a Windrush scandal. So their stories weren't written down at the time. What do we know about the people on board? Well, we know that Sam King, in his autobiography, described the journey, and that's probably the best we've got. He did an appendix, which claims to list 492 Jamaicans that went on the Windrush to seek employment. But I know there are a lot of errors in that list. And one can't really expect Sam to remember which of the 1,027 were Black Jamaicans, whether they were looking for work and so on. So I think I can forgive him that. What else have we got? We've got Ancestry, but Ancestry is very, very patchy indeed. I still can't work out why some of the entries are included in Ancestry and some aren't. Goldsmiths, I'm really sorry to say this, but I urge massive caution on the Goldsmiths list. I'm finding at least a 50% error rate. And I have brought it to their attention, and I've given them the individual errors, which I thought was very kind of me, since I'd done all the donkey work. But in response, all they did was put in a one line saying, we've done our best to get this right. So it's a good starting point, Goldsmiths, but please be a little bit wary. And as a historian, I am worried that once something inaccurate gets into the system, it gets repeated and repeated and snowballed. So, we've got that. So in effect, I think we know very, very little about the individual passengers. And some of the things we do think we know are inaccurate. There's an iconic photograph of Mona Baptiste at Tilbury Dock playing a saxophone. And the following day, the Daily Mail said, "Oh, the saxophonist Mona Baptiste was part of the journey." I know, as her biographer, that Mona never played a saxophone in her life. There's another article about there were Olympic cyclists on board. Well, there weren't. You look at the 1948 Olympics, and there's no evidence of any a Jamaican cycling team. So, I want to, first of all, tell their stories, but I also want to make sure that it's accurate. What do we know? All we've got really is the passenger list. So what we've got is a passenger number. We've got where they boarded the Windrush and where they're due to get off, and obviously everybody was getting off at Tilbury. We've got their name. And because the passenger list is now 74 years old and was never in the best of condition, the type's a bit faint, the names are quite often difficult to make legible. Now, I think that's one of the problems with Goldsmiths. I think they've gone for a guess, whereas I've actually delved a lot deeper so I can establish what the correct names are. We also know which class of they travelled in. It's either first class, B class. There were a small number of sailors in B class, and then C class, which was the vast majority of those that were going across to seek work. We've got age, but we don't have the date of birth or the place of birth, which I think add a lot to the story. There's also a column for whether they're travelling with their husband or wife, and very, very few were indeed. These were mainly young men, a lot of them ex-servicemen, a lot of them ex-RAF, So very, very few of them had a wife, let alone, was traveling with one. And at that sort of cost, £48 and £28, it would have been very, very expensive to take the family. There's also a column for children between 1 and 12, and then another column for any children that were under 12 months. What should be useful is the proposed address, so we can work out where these people were headed. Unfortunately, some of them have no address, and a lot of them didn't go to the address that they declared. And I think what probably happened was they were on board ship for 4 weeks. They probably got talking to a friend and they said, oh, I know a really good place. So where they ended up was often very, very different from where they said they were going at the outset. So it's dangerous to use that address list to come to any real conclusions. Occupation, obviously that's a helpful one. They all had occupations, very, very varied, but a lot of mechanics, fitters, engineers. They were mainly the ex-RAF guys. The few females that travelled usually were dressmakers, but the occupation is a really, really handy one to have, so we can work out what they did when they got here. Although, as you well know, their skills and their talents were very much underplayed when they arrived in Britain. I mean, it's not a Windrush story, but one of the ladies I interviewed was a qualified teacher. She arrived in England from Jamaica, went for a job as a teacher, and they said, we don't recognise those qualifications. And why don't you become a dinner lady? So, they didn't always get the jobs that their talents would have warranted. There's also the country of the last permanent residence, which means that it doesn't mean nationality. So, for example, the Calypsonians who were Trinidadian had been working in Jamaica. So they said their country of last permanent residence was Jamaica. So again, you can't come to conclusions about nationality, although obviously they were all British when it comes to the end of the day. Country of permanent residence, again, that was sometimes misunderstood, but by and large, the majority said they were coming to England permanently. So that's the information we've got. What I want to do is draw a picture for each of them. What was their background like in the West Indies? Did they come from a wealthy family? Were they escaping poverty? What was the driver that brought them to board the Windrush and come to England? I mean, some of them were musicians and they wanted to play in big nightclubs, and there wasn't money to be made in the West Indies as musicians. Mona Baptiste's a good example. What was the journey like? I mean, it'd be lovely. There are quite a few living Windrush passengers, believe it or not. I found one only last week in Wolverhampton. He's 94 now, but I'm going to interview him soon. And to find out firsthand what the Windrush was like, and it'll be fantastic. So what was the journey like? What happened when they got here? Were they well received? Some of them weren't. Did they go where they said they were going to go? Where did they go? Did they marry? I mean, there were a lot of mixed marriages as a result of the passengers that came across. What was life like for them? Where did they work? And another really, really important one is, what family did they have? Because what I'm finding is that there was masses of talent on the Windrush itself, but the families have turned out into fantastically talented people as well. I mean, the Windrush has produced so much good for this country. I mean, there are Olympic athletes, a future head of Harrow School, politicians. So really, so what I want for the 1027 is, broadly, where were you born? When were you born? What made you come across to England? How did things go for you? What family did you have? When did you die? I mean, a lot of them did go to the States. It didn't work out for everyone. Very few went back to the West Indies, but quite a lot decided England perhaps wasn't the place to be, and they went across to the States. So I mean, perhaps a future, and as I say, most of them success stories, overcome adversity and added so much to the country. It's quite heartwarming.
Well, Bill, thank you so much. That's a really interesting presentation. All right, Vivian, you're going to ask some
Yes,
questions.
to thank you most sincerely for the presentation and to thank June Elizabeth also. I hasten to ask though, with regard to this presentation, could you tell us a little more about stowaways? Because I had a relative who was a stowaway and he died last year at 101. And I have his funeral program sent to me from England. And yes, I hasten to hear a little more about stowaways.
Yeah, I mean, when the Windrush was coming across, two stowaways were identified. One of them is very famous, Evelyn Wauchope. She was the only female stowaway, and when the passengers realised that this poor lady had been caught, I think she had enough money to perhaps pay the second class fare, but she was pretty shocked when she was told, well, actually, all females need to go into first class, and that's £48. So what the passengers did was they had a kind of a concert for her, musicians and so on, and they charged a little amount to for people to attend the concert, and they collected the £48 and paid her fare. So you know, she was there legitimately. She actually formed a friendship with Nancy Cunard of the shipping heiress. But when Evelyn came across to England, she actually stayed with Mona Baptiste for a little while. But she was one that didn't stay in England. She went to New York and did very well for herself in New York, and ended up being she had a very, very nice house, a landlady. So Evelyn was the most famous one. The other guy was a Jamaican, I think, called Samuel Johnson. But when the ship arrived in Tilbury, legend has it that several of the stowaways jumped overboard and you know, escaped. 15 were arrested, and within 24 hours appeared in Colchester Court nearby. And their only offence was that, because they were allowed to be here, they were British, so they weren't illegal immigrants as we might suspect these days. They had two offences. One of them was being on the ship without permission, and the other one was not having a valid fare. So they got I think they got a choice of, I think it's about 10 days in prison, or I've got it written down, but I'd like to say a £5 fine. And most of them took the 10 days in prison. So, you know, and those 15 then went on and made their, you know, made their lives in England as they saw fit.
Well, thank you, Bill. That's great. So, Vivian, what was the name of the person?
Oh, his name is RENALD
Say his first name again. I got Burton.
RENALD Burton.
Right. I don't think he was one of the 15, so perhaps he's one that managed to escape apprehension.
Well, and his brother Egerton, EGERTON, Burton.
Right.
Egerton. Just look for those names for me.
Yeah, yeah.
Everton.
The thing, though, is that Reynolds married an English lady whose family disowned her. She was disowned by her family. But Reynolds, as I said, I have his funeral program, which my son brought for me in December. He lived to be 101.
Wow. I think there's a lot of fear even now because of the Windrush scandal. When I talk to people like Alfred Gardner, who is a 96-year-old ex-Windrush passenger, he won't talk. He'll smile and he'll laugh about the stowaways, intimating that there were a lot of them, but he won't give any names, because I think there's still a fear, even 74 years later, that somebody will come along and tap them on the shoulder and say, "You're going back."
You're
and who can blame them in the current climate, to be fair?
Well, my relative was eventually became British citizen, and his duppy's coming back to Jamaica. So he will be buried in Jamaica, complete with white rum.
Oh, Vivian, you're lovely. Right, okay. Was there anything else you wanted to comment on? Because this will be a wonderful resource for next year. I don't know when you're hoping to ever, well, I
Well,
suppose
yes, I will,
the research
outside
bill.
of this meeting, Liz, outside of this meeting, I'll contact him, and
Right.
Bill, we'll speak with Bill, and we will be able to build our story. Because as I said, it is really a painful story, and we have to get rid of the hurts. But because for some Jamaicans, it was another enslavement, the abuses which we're subjected to. Windrush was for us another enslavement because of the abuses. Yes, you were free, but free to do what? Free to hide.
Gosh,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Yes, this is a hard story, but it's an important story to explore, and we have more people understand it. Now we've had some more of us join the panel since we've got going. So Lorna, I'm pleased you're with us, and Horace Barnes, I'm delighted to see you, and Shabana as well, and also Makapi Selassie. Makapi's joining us from Tanzania, but Makapi, I hope your line's going to be okay, because I'm actually going to ask Horace next just to introduce himself, because Horace, I hope that you may come and do a little longer presentation one of the weeks to tell us about the exciting work you're doing. Good to see you, Horace.
Yeah, God bless you all. Thank you, Liz, for inviting us. It's taken a little while for us to get this connection together, but good things always worth waiting for. Yeah, with the Why West Indian project, we talk about why West Indians are in this country, which is to trying to engage with people so they can understand why West Indians came, how long they've been coming, which is over 500 years, them and their ancestors, to fight, defend, protect, nurse Britain, and continue to do so today. So yeah, it'd be great to come do a presentation for you whenever you're ready, Liz, just say. And hello to everybody. God bless you all.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. And I don't mind. We've got plenty of spaces over the next few weeks. So should we confirm over email, which will be the best date? Now, I can see Shabana Marshall's got a heart there by you. Shabana, can you introduce yourself and explain where you're from?
Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here and lovely to meet so many of you. I'm a senior lecturer at St Mary's University in Twickenham, and my remit is teacher education, and my other area is Holocaust education, and I'm also working to support teachers in the northeast of England to explore local connections with the history of the transatlantic enslavement of African people, given that often this history is taught as something that happened over there somewhere, rather than in places like the northeast having a link, and just how teachers can, through the curriculum, explore these histories through local connection. And I'm doing a PhD at Durham University as well. So I'm very immersed, but also the other big thing for me is the South Asian immigration to Britain, and how that fits along with a lot of the narratives that we hear about marginalized groups. Sorry, that was a really long response.
No, that's just beautiful. Thank you very much indeed. But so many interesting things there. So you're going to get an email off me too, because there's lots of things there I'm interested in.
Excuse me, Liz. Excuse me for interrupting. Of course, a memory, unless I write it down. Hello, Shabana. I could give a connection. If I give you, if you give Liz, if you give Shabana my connection, as belonging to the Windrush National Organisation, we have a gentleman in Oxford, and he's South Asian, and he's doing something that maybe could connect up with Shabana, that he can support, give us some information on South Asian migration.
Thank you, June. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm June Elizabeth. Yeah, lovely.
June Elizabeth. Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, June Elizabeth. That's really great. And one of the things that we do with our opportunities here are to connect people and make connections across. So I can see going across my screen various connections at different times, but I try not to hog it all. So yes, it would be really interesting to explore more about the South Asian immigration, because Black History Month, which came from America for very good reasons, is very much focused on the Black experience, and there is also other initiatives that support that. And when I talk later, you'll see that. Thanks ever so much, Shabana. That's wonderful. Lorna, can I just ask you to introduce yourself briefly? Are you there? Okay, that's fine. And Shabana's telling us South Asian Heritage Month was introduced. So that's 2019. So a bit of practice. I've been out of the country a while, Shabana, so I'm not all that up to speed. We'll catch up with Lorna again, perhaps at some stage. Right, I'm going to ask now, Makapi, are you there? Are you able to chat with us? Makapi, are you there? Are you able to chat with us? Makapi Selassie is a good friend of mine.
Yeah, greetings everyone. Yes, Samuel, you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Thank you very much indeed. And we really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah,
One of the
pleasure.
Makapi is going to share with us is a little bit of his story. And I don't know if we can do maybe a bit today, Makapi, and then a bit another day, because Makapi and I work together with a very good colleague called Hapti Wold, and sadly Hapti passed this week. So Makapi and I have had really sad conversation, but Makapi and Hapti joined Yasa Safari, and I was there as support, exploring the history and the roots and development of Rastafari in the West Midlands. So that was a fantastic experience. But Makapi and I have also talked quite a lot about Makapi's own personal story, or the story of families like his family, where your parents came over in the 1950s, I think. Makapi, you tell us your story.
Okay, yeah. Greetings everyone. My parents came over in 1955. They came from a place called Gibraltar, St. Anne's in Jamaica. Due to the extensive, what can I say, advertising or recruiting of Jamaicans to come forward to help the motherland, in inverted commas, or the mother country. They came 1955, leaving 7 children behind. The youngest one was about 10 months, I think it was, or a year, about a year. She was born 1954. My mother came over 1955. I was born 1956. And then there were 2 other, my 2 younger sisters, born 1958 to 1960. So in all, my mom and dad had 10 children.
Wow.
7 were born in Jamaica and 3 were born in England. And so basically they came and they worked to, get the family over. Originally, I don't know where it came from, but, it was a 5-year plan. But that never materialized. And so what Liz said that I should look at is those children who were left behind, and what were their feelings of being left behind, and in what way did that affect the family. So that's what I'm looking at. I've started so far. So I've interviewed my brothers, three of my brothers, and two of my sisters. I've got got two sisters to interview, and then I've got my nephews, uncles, and so on to do. So yeah, that's what I'll be doing. I'm looking at their story, being left behind. What was it like? You know what I mean? The joy of receiving barrels or parcels or
Parcels,
you know,
parcels.
yeah, and that kind of thing. You know, my brothers that I've interviewed so far, they said that they left from. So when my parents left, my mother took my brothers, three of them, to Kingston, and they stayed with a relative there. My sister stayed back in country or back in St. Anne's, Gibraltar. And so, yeah, they were excited to go to Kingston because, you know, what they call it, town. So, you know, there were more mod cons there in Kingston, electric and running water and so on and so forth. So, you know, for them, it was like an adventure, right? Yeah. So that they said that they were fortunate in that the relative that they stayed with looked after them, and she didn't have any children. And so she looked after them like they were three sons, basically. But they did say that other children who were in the same kind of situation were not that lucky. And so, you know, they ended up with maybe grandma or other relatives, and the other relatives mistreated them. You know what I mean? When money came, withheld it and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I've just started. So I'll give it maybe a couple more weeks. I'll get some more interviews in and then I'll present.
McCarthy, thank you so much. And I know that it's a really difficult time for you. I know you're going to ask something.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Or am I muted? The young man who just spoke, he said, about families that were fortunate. And I hear a lot of sad stories coming from the Windrush and the children who were left behind and all that. Not all children had hardship in those days. And lots of them were very fortunate, very happy to be with grandparents, and that include myself. In arriving here, and I'd love to do an interview with a young man because I arrived here in 57, 58 and started school. My parents came in 52 and 53. My stepbrother came in 55. I've got friends who came younger than myself, but not everyone had extreme hardship. And the parcels, thank you, Vivian, not barrels, the parcels were wonderful. I've got a suitcase with all my memorabilia, the dress I wore to England when I was size 6. Yes, so yes, not all were unfortunate and living in hardship. I'll ask Liz something later. I don't know if maybe I should continue. Since
either, it's lovely, Ina.
Since speaking to the group or joining the group, thank you, June Elizabeth, for asking me. I found something that was given to me, and I've always found myself in positions that things are given to me and I don't know why. But this was a article about the Davidton United Church in Manchester, not far from where Bill Morris was born, and listen, yes, and myself. And this was the story from 1843 to 2013, a history of that church. And I'd like to share it with you all sometimes. It's very interesting and it's very dear to my heart, because I support the church now. It's still ongoing. I wrote to the Queen when it was 160 years old, and I had a lovely letter from the Queen. and I'm still puzzled by the English language. The Queen has commanded me to write to you, and I'm thinking, well, that means she's replying to me. And it was a letter sending congratulations to them. But the church was started by the London Missionary Society. And
That's
I thought,
fantastic. And it would be great if you wanted to have an opportunity to talk about the church at
Yes.
some stage.
yes,
So
yes,
we'll
I'd just like to
get
share
through the
that,
Windrush stories first, and then we've got
yes,
some more weeks
some,
before.
when
we
you're,
finish.
your next set, yes. Thank
Okay,
you.
we've got more
Thank you
people
for
wanting
giving
to
us
ask
that
you
call.
questions, Ina. Don't disappear.
Oh.
Vivian?
Yes, from Agape, I wanted to thank him most sincerely for his presentation too, because from Gibraltar, Agape, there is a Joyce Christie. Her married name is Jarrett, and her son is the chief executive officer of the Jamaican National Building Society.
Okay.
Yes,
Wow,
Earl
that's
Jarrett, Earl Jarrett. Earl Jarrett's mom is, and Joyce is quite around, is from Gibraltar. And we hear so much about the Anglican church there. And Joyce went ashore to Teachers College, and she's now in their Hall of Fame. So Gibraltar is very dear to me, although I'm from far away Portland.
okay.
Wow. Shabana, you wanted to ask a question or make a comment?
Yes, thanks, Liz. I'm fascinated by the suitcase that Ina brought over with all the memorabilia. I was thinking, can we not have a session where she talks us through some of these items and shares them? Because I would love to see that.
No, I have a question for Ina, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Ina, is it a suitcase or is it a grip?
Well, we're posh these days in saying suitcase. It's a grip. But no, it's not it's a suitcase because it was sent from England. The jamboree in 1957, the suitcase, it was sent from England with the material for the clothing that I had made to arrive in England.
But when it reached Jamaica, we call it grip.
Maybe we did, yes, then it was grip, but yes, but it wasn't the, the grips that were made with the cow leather and all that. It was the English fashionable grip. Yeah.
A bit like this.
No, not like that. We were more, my mom was more sophisticated in getting, it's lined with, maybe it was made in Nottingham.
Where Liz got that? Where you got that, Liz? That's called a dulcinea. That's called a dulcinea.
Well, when I came over on the Windrush, no,
dulcinea, it's called.
It's a lovely little case. It's only small, and I just keep it here by me. And my granddaughter keeps some little toys in it. It's just a family memory. I don't remember because it's
Those
such
are
a little
lovely,
case.
strong, lovely and strong.
Oh, Ina, so we're going to book you in to share all the things out of your case, are we? That would be wonderful.
Well, in your next episode, I'll have to get to it in the loft and show what is it, find out what's in there.
All right. Well, if you don't mind sharing with us, that would be so lovely.
Yes.
Ina's case, right? I've written that down here. Well, it's really fun and well, fun. We're making it fun. They're hard stories. And McCarthy, thank you very much indeed for sharing, introducing us to your family. And now McCarthy is, as I say, working on a project to with me to find out, and record more stories about his family, because these stories are so important. Last year, Learning Links International were fortunate to have funding, and we ran a conference on Windrush, which was like a 2-hour Zoom session like this. But we had support from the Jamaican High Commissioner, and we also had support from several people who told their family story, including Apu Baga from South Wales. And so the Windrush generation now in some families, I mean, McCarthy, there's what, 5 generations now in your family? Not sure if you're hearing, McCarthy. 5 generations?
Yeah. It's got there. Well, my mom passed December, gone at the age of 101.
Wow.
And yeah,
Wow.
he had great grandchildren, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing, absolutely amazing. Now, thank you very much, McCarthy, then. So McCarthy's also going to tell us one Windrush story that I've never heard referred to, and that's a story of the Rastas, the Windrush generation children who found Rasta, became Rasta. I'm not quite sure how you say it now, McCarthy. I used to be much better with my terminologies. So McCarthy is going to share with us a little bit about that. And McCarthy's and Hapti was such special friends, and you still are, McCarthy. And we worked together with the NOMS, the National Offender Management Service, and we wrote the guidance. Well, McCarthy and Hapti wrote the guidance for the prisons for Rastafarian inmates. And I typed it, and we did 26 updates of it, 26, revisions of it until the NOMS department were happy with it. And then McCarthy and Hapti trained all the prison chaplains, and also you worked in prisons, didn't you, McCarthy, at one stage, supporting prisoners with Rastafari faith, and made sure they had the necessary things so they could have groundings and sessions. So yeah, we'll hear about that from you one time rather than me tell you that story. Thanks very much.
No problem.
Okay, thanks,
No
McCarthy, for joining us. Now, Beverly Lassie. Beverly's joined us, joined our panel today. Beverly, you there? Hello, Beverly.
It's right here.
Good. Beverly, where are you joining us from?
I'm joining from Jamaica, and Mr. Vivian Crawford is my neighbor in terms of work.
Excellent.
So I'm at the National Library of Jamaica. Yes, Mr. Crawford, I see you waving. So he told me about this, and I joined late because I should boast that the National Library of Jamaica was the organization that brought the Windrush, the whole Windrush discussion in Jamaica.
Right, that's wonderful then. Tell us a little bit about that, Beverly. Why do you feel that the library had to bring this discussion forward?
Okay, so this historian and it's a lecturer at the university. She informed us of the whole Windrush, and she told me, and she said, oh, this would be something that the National Library could put forward, and we wanted to have a partnership with the major print media company in Jamaica, the Gleaner.
Yeah.
Right, the Jamaica Gleaner. So we had a meeting with them to ask them to see if we could get as much memorabilia what persons have here in Jamaica, so that we could write this story and have this thing all over Jamaica. Now, they advertised it for free, but unfortunately it didn't make much mileage. But we did do a major exhibition, which we took throughout the entire Jamaica. And we actually visited the British Library when they were launching the Windrush exhibition there. So we were specially invited guests to England. Yeah. Yes. I should tell you though that I had another meeting, so I was just on air hiding. So my director is here now for the other meeting, which we should have started earlier. So it's nice hearing all of you. I'm hearing and I'm seeing the grip, and I have a grip here as well. Okay.
So Beverly, will you join us another week then to tell us more about this? And do you have an electronic version of your exhibition that you toured?
wow, we are actually in the process of doing those kinds of exhibitions now. But I think we had the images of the still, the exhibition. So I will look for that one and share it with you. Give Mr. Crawford all the contact information. All right.
I will.
And
I
right.
will do.
I'm here, I'm here listening, but I'm in another meeting.
Yes,
all right.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much. I love
Thank
people.
you. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
very much, Beverly. Thank you. Thank you. And Vivian, thank you very much indeed for linking us with Beverly. So if Beverly's got photographs, if she wants to send those over, I can make a PowerPoint with them, or maybe you can over there, because with Zoom now and with PowerPoint, you can just share so much information. So that's really, really lovely. That's really good. So I'm just having a quick look around the screen. Lorna, I was asking for. Lorna, are you there, dear? You might not like me referring to you like that. Lorna? Somebody says it's like a seance, Is there anybody there? Lorna, are you there? No, she's obviously gone off to make a cup of tea. Excellent. And then, right, now I'm going to just share my PowerPoint. Some of you know I'm a PowerPoint addict, and just catch up with a few other things. But just before I do that, was there anything else that anybody wanted to follow up on any of those points?
Yes. Hello, Liz.
Yes.
I'm here with one of my best friends. She's been
All right.
listening to a part of her name is Aisha, and we've been friends from I was at school, and now I'm retired and she'll be 70 soon. I'll just introduce you to her. Here's Aisha.
Hello.
How lovely that you've joined us. It's really nice. Okay, just in case you want to...
Yeah, sorry, what Aisha just said to me, because her mother-in-law came from Jamaica, but she flew over. She was saying that there's so many stories that her mother-in-law told her. Well, I know her mother-in-law in Northampton. I visit her. And 95. So you carry on. Sorry, let me just tell you briefly. She's 95, about them marrying to get the pension.
Yeah, she's 95 and I've been with her since I was 16 and I'm 70 now. And so she's told me many stories of her young life and what she's experienced. And she was telling me about when some of the Jamaican men were called into service and they went to fight in the war for the UK. They actually married some of their baby mothers because they could get a married allowance. But they didn't actually stay with them or continue with them. And some of them passed away in the war. But that was a very, interesting story that she was telling me.
I think it is interesting, and I think there are some stories of such bravery where couples did stay together, but also, realizing the sadness when it was not possible for couples to stay together. We had a very good speaker quite a while ago talking about the brown babies. They were the babies that were fathered by Black US personnel during the war, and they weren't allowed to take their baby mothers back to the States. And many of them ended up living in Bernardo's children's homes. So that was Lucy Bland. That was really interesting. So there are some very poignant stories. So I thank you very much for sharing that. Thank you.
Okay.
And, join us again with another story, please, too. Okay.
All right, I'd love to. Thank you.
Sharon?
Hello. I'd just like to say, the gentleman that's doing the interviewing his family members,
Yes,
I thought it was really quite interesting because being born here, when he said, the left behind children, like my friends, we talk about the left behind issues, and I think there's so many levels of mental health that whether people recognize it or they don't recognize it, and trauma that the children that were left behind, the parents that had to leave them doing the long arm parenting. I think it's really important that we sort of like really kind of recognize this. And I think within my own family, I've seen a lot, just so many different levels of things that have happened to family members who have not reconciled their relationship with their mothers, with their fathers, not understanding why they went away to make life better. And then for the parents that weren't able to bring the children up. So I just wanted to just say, add that. That's all.
Thank you, Sharon. That's very kind of you to share that. And certainly this is one of the things that maybe because it's so difficult to talk about, hasn't been talked about, the children left behind. And Makapi, I'm very grateful that you're going to share your family's story. And if anybody has, perhaps you might ask Hilary Robertson Hickling, Vivian, ask her, because Professor Fred Hickling had done quite a lot on these mental health issues. So I'll ask Hilary if she can join us. She's in Jamaica to talk to this one, Sharon. Okay.
I saw her last night.
Yeah. So what we've done. Sorry.
Yeah, I was saying I saw Hillary last night because a very outstanding, two outstanding Jamaicans, Trinidadian Jamaican, passed on. One is Honorable Barbara Gludon. She wrote the pantomime. She worked at the Gleaner. She was editor for Children's Zone, etc., etc. And her husband was from Trinidad. He specialized in endemic orchids of Jamaica. They passed away 2 weeks from the other. So funeral Sunday for one, 2nd of June for the other. But I saw Hillary last night. So I look forward to her father's contribution in terms of mental health.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Thank you there. Okay, I'm just going to go back to the PowerPoint. As I say, there was this really interesting article in The Independent about the children left behind. I won't read this all out now, but that'll be something we can come to another time. And this was another interesting perspective. And this is an Australian perspective. Appreciate the fact that I hear the news from here. And this was reported on the SBS TV News, that the Windrush generation, the history of unbelonging, which is an interesting phrase. So that's an interesting article as well. So if you want copies of any of these, then just let me know or do a screenshot or whatever. This also was an issue again that Nadine White wrote about. She's a race correspondent in The Independent, and this was just quite recent. Jamaicans with disabilities who came to the UK as children facing unjust and inhumane deportation, because this is another thing that we need to consider in this this whole story and the Windrush scandal. And we'll be inviting Janita Cox, who's doing research into the issues that are still affecting people with the Windrush scandal now. And now this was a perspective from an African publication. Joys of Googling from this part of the world is you get all kinds of different sources. The Empire Windrush, people thinking they were going to the land of milk and honey. Now, when I made that comment about the East End of London being so badly blitzed, I mean, the people of Britain, the island of Great Britain, must have been absolutely shell-shocked in 1948. And I can only think that, you know, that was a cause of some of the challenges and issues. But this was an interesting article as well. And that's the New African Museum. newafricanmagazine.com /6166729 / but ask me if you want a copy of that. Okay, so I'm just going to go through a few other points now. When I'm doing this, I can't see if people have got their hands up or anything, so just shout out if there's anything you want to ask me or tell me. This is interesting. English Heritage last year commissioned a series of 6 portraits celebrating the lives of people from the African diaspora whose stories have contributed to England's rich history. So that's an interesting one to look up. Sorry, that's and each painting was, oh, you can see them all online. Okay, so for those of you who think you need to learn more, as I do, don't forget that Future Learn has quite a lot of interesting sessions. Vivian, I don't know how well Future Learn is known in Jamaica, but you can do all these training courses free online if you finish them within the prescribed time. I tried one and didn't finish it in time, but you get the first so many weeks, 6 weeks or 3 weeks free. So that's fascinating, and particularly the country houses in the British Empire, how imperialism transformed Britain's colonial countryside. And there's a picture of Penryn Castle, one of the research projects I'm involved in, and also about why do people migrate theories. Quite an interesting opportunity there. Right, now this refers to the point made earlier by Shabana about pioneers of Indian Arrival Day and commemorations in the Caribbean. So this is an event that's going on in Belize, I think. Can't quite read fast enough, but also online so others can see it as well. And this is the Pioneers of Indian Arrival Day, commemorations of the Caribbean. And that's Sunday, the 29th of May, so coming up soon. All right, and this was just to tell you that I saw this really interesting TV program. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the whole of my family's got COVID apart from me, so I'm in absolute isolation at the moment, watching the telly all week. So a guy with African heritage in the States bought a former plantation house and did some research on it and discovered that Sharswood was actually a former plantation house where his ancestors were enslaved. I'm really interested to try and understand American Black history and have opportunities to see things on the TV over here from time to time. And a bit of good news here. In Wales, where I'm based when I'm in the UK, Zero Racism Wales, and a Welsh medium, that means I speak Welsh in the school, secondary school, Ysgol Morgan Lloyd, is located in the town of Wrexham, and it's going to see every one of its 800 pupils sign up to the Zero Racism Pledge, making their school the first of its kind in Wales. This is particularly important being in the town of Wrexham, which is one of the places in North Wales where I've been with Black colleagues who've been overtly challenged on a race basis. And so I think anything that can be done in Wrexham's a good thing, but it's good that Wales is taking such a clear step forward. So that's all good news. So it's just been brilliant. Now we've got Beverly Lashley join us now. Oh, Beverly, you were talking earlier, sorry, from the National Library, and you're listening in to us. So now, is there anything anybody else wants to add before I finish the recording? If not,
I just want to say hello to Horace Barnes from the West Indian Midlands. Hello, Horace. Nice to see you here. And I will be in touch regarding the Walter Toll Day, maybe next year in Northampton. Okay, take care.
That's wonderful. We're really looking forward to your talk, Horace. That'll be really interesting. Vivian, you've got your hand up.
Yes, and to thank you very much. So sorry I have to run, but to ask if in future if we could link our parishes, because that makes it easier for us. The moment I heard this morning about Gibraltar, I could know St. Anne, and from St. Anne near Gibraltar is a place called Wattown, which has really, really promoted the heritage. They defied anything imposed on them and maintain the heritage which we now look up to and look forward to, the indomitable Wat Town. So we want us to identify our parish and the place names if at all possible. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Vivian. Thank you very much to everyone who's joined us. And I'd just like to say that a couple of weeks ago, someone made a suggestion that we actually it was on the North Wales Jamaica Society open session, but they put a plea for some training courses, which is why I'm interested in Future Learn, because Vivian, one of the things you and I have started to talk about is how can we create Zoom sessions that can be training courses, and working around the island a parish at a time would be a really, really good way of doing that, because she was saying that we were talking about North Clarendon, where we're involved in a project in the little community of Pennants, and this lady's name, I think her last name was Pennants, but she certainly had heritage in that area. And she said she'd not visited very often, and it was difficult to understand because she didn't know the area. So it would be really useful. I mean, even if we just did one a month for next year or something, it would be really interesting. I'd be really interested if the Institute of Jamaica could help. Well, anyway, on that positive note, and everybody clapping, at the beginning and the end of these sessions, when we're not recording, we can catch up and have a chat. So I'm just going to attempt to end the recording this time. It hasn't been successful the last 2 weeks.
I have to say bye.
Okay.
All right.
Bye from
Bye,
Manchester.
everyone.
Bye,
Thank
bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
I'll send
Bye,
you
everyone.
mangoes.
Bye from Manchester, Belfield.
Bye from South London.
Yeah.
Bye from Jamaica, Kingston.
Yeah.
Bye
I'm
from
in
Melbourne.
Oxford, England. Birmingham, England.
That's
Dar es Salaam,
next
Tanzania.
week. We'll be a bit further on the journey by next week. Okay, bye.
Julie Mangoes. Bye.
Julie Mangoes.
Please